They found the wedding veil on Mama's grave. 17 years had passed since she'd been laid beneath the old cottonwood tree that stood just beyond our homestead, where the Red Rock Canyon yawned wide like a mouth thirsty for rain. There were no fences there, just sagebrush lizards and the wind that whispered things it wasn't supposed to know. Most days, I didn't go near that grave. But that morning, the light felt strange. The silence had a pulse. And there it was, draped like a crown over the headstone, soft and white. The veil. It wasn't there the day before. That I knew for certain. I'd passed the grave with a basket full of corn husks and dead chickens on my heels. And now there it was, white as fresh snow, untouched by dust, pinned down by nothing, yet unmoved by the wind. It smelled faintly of lavender and something sadder, something like goodbye. I didn't touch it, not right away. Because that veil didn't belong to the past. It didn't belong to Mama. It belonged to me. And I knew it wasn't a tribute. It was a claim. That was the moment the ache returned, the one I'd buried deeper than Mama, the one I only let out when the nights got too quiet and the stars felt too close. The ache to be loved, not admired, not owned, not bargained for with cattle and land, but seen, known, held like I was worth remembering. They used to call me Emmeline the Quiet. I was the preacher's daughter, the only girl left in Painted Hollow, who hadn't been kissed in secret or claimed in marriage. Some said I was too strange, others too good, and a few whispered I was touched by Mama's blood a wildness the church couldn't bless and men couldn't tame. Mama had been the color red in a town built from beige. She wore her hair down, danced barefoot at dusk, and once laughed in the face of Judge Crowthorne himself. Some say that's why she died. I say that's why she lived, but they never forgave her for it. After she died, the town didn't speak of her. They rewrote her memory as a warning. Don't ride too far, don't speak too loud, don't wear your skirts too bright. As if the desert didn't already silence us with its heat and hunger. As if a woman needed reminding not to be herself. I was 7 when she died and 17 when I found the veil. 10 years of watching other girls get picked like apples one by one, married off to men who wore law on their lips and desire on their hands. I stayed behind, still, clean, waiting. Not because I was pure, but because I was afraid. Afraid that if I gave myself away, I'd vanish too. Fade into someone else's silence like Mama had. So I kept to myself. I spent more time with horses than with people. I knew how to read the weather by the shape of the clouds and how to track coyote footprints before they reached the chickens. But I didn't know what it felt like to be chosen. Not truly, not willingly, until the veil. The thing about the desert is it doesn't lie. It may hide things, sure, but what it reveals honestly. And that morning, under the pale sky and the yawning mouth of Painted Hollow, the veil told me something was coming. A choice, a danger, a pull too strong to ignore. I wanted to believe it was from Mama that she was sending me a sign, a blessing, a protection. But deep down, I knew better. Mama would never have wrapped my name in silk and submission. This wasn't her way. This veil wasn't stitched with love. It was soaked in claim and control. And still part of me longed for it. That's the truth of it. That's the part I hate admitting even now. I wanted to be loved so bad, I was willing to ignore the rope around the ribbon, the bruise beneath the perfume. I wanted the fairy tale, even if it was written in blood. So I stood there, under the cottonwood tree, wind tugging at my dress heart, clawing against my ribs, and I stared at the veil like it might speak. But it didn't have to. I already knew what it was saying. You're next. It was a Tuesday when I found him. Not that days mattered much in Painted Hollow time here, stretched like dried leather tight and cracked, only changing when something split. But I remember it was Tuesday because Papa had gone into town for tobacco and nails, and I was left to feed the hens and drag the wash down from the line before the wind got mouthy again. I nearly missed him. The sun was just beginning to slip behind the canyon ridge, turning the sky that strange kind of gold you only see out here when I heard a sound. A broken breath, like a wounded animal trying not to cry out. I followed it to the back of the barn, and there he was, curled up against the wall like a man who'd forgotten how to stand. Blood had soaked through his side, dark and sticky, already drying in the dust. One hand was clutched over the wound, the other stretched toward the water bucket that hung from the beam just out of reach. He didn't flinch when he saw me, just looked up slow and steady like I was the one who didn't belong there. His eyes were dark, not black, but something older like riverstone warmed by years of sun and silence. There was pain in them, yes, but something else too. Something that made me forget my name for a breath and then remember it all too clearly. I should have screamed, or run, or fetched Papa, but I didn't. I dropped to my knees instead, heart pounding so loud it echoed in my teeth. My hands reached for the water bucket before I even realized I'd moved. I dipped a tin cup in and held it to his lips. He drank slow like he hadn't tasted water in days. Then he closed his eyes. That was the first time I touched him, his shoulder just lightly to check his pulse. It was there, slow but strong, alive, and just like that, my world split open. He was Apache or part way. That much I could tell from the lines of his face, the braid in his hair, the strange markings faintly visible on his chest beneath the torn shirt. Around here, that made him danger. To some, less than a man. To others, a ghost of war. To me, he was different. He was what the desert must have looked like before fences. Wild, broken, beautiful. I dragged him into the cellar. Don't ask me how. Adrenaline, I guess. Or maybe it was the way he kept his eyes on mine even when half unconscious, trusting me before I even knew if I could trust myself. For 3 days, he didn't speak. I cleaned the wound with whiskey and boiled cloth. I ground herbs Mama once taught me to recognize and sang songs I hadn't dared sing since her voice stopped joining mine. I moved around him like a prayer, cautious but constant. He never moaned, never begged, just breathed and watched. Sometimes I'd catch him studying me when he thought I wasn't looking. Not in the way most men look at women out here, with hunger or judgment, but with something softer, sadder. Like he saw the parts of me no one else bothered to notice. The part that longed, the part that listened, the part that had never once been called beautiful without a price attached. And God help me, I started to look forward to his silence. It wasn't empty like other men's silences. It didn't threaten or punish. It was the kind of quiet that asked nothing from me. The kind that let me be. One evening, I found a feather at the edge of the cellar step crow feather, black with a single white streak. I don't know if he placed it there or if the wind had carried it in, but I tucked it behind a beam near his bedroll anyway. It felt like something sacred, something shared. And still I told no one, not Papa, not Clara, not even myself, not fully, because I knew what it would mean if they found him, what it would mean for me. Harboring an Apache injured, unarmed Mysterious was treason in the eyes of Painted Hollow. And in the eyes of Judge Crowthorne, it was far worse. It was defiance, but something in me had already chosen. I didn't know his name yet, didn't know where he came from, or who had hurt him, or if he would live to see the next full moon. All I knew was this. The day I found that veil, something claimed me. But the day I found him, something freed me. The veil returned 3 days later. This time, it was folded neatly on our porch bench. No note, no visitor. Just white silk and silence. Papa didn't notice it when he came in from mending the fence. Or if he did, he said nothing. That was his way. He was a man built of prayer and retreat. Ever since Mama's death, he'd spoken more to God than to me. But I saw it, and I knew where it came from. Only one person in Painted Hollow worked with silk like that. Clara Bain, the seamstress who had stitched every wedding veil in this town for the last 15 years. She was also my only friend, not because we shared dreams or giggles, but because we understood something quiet about each other. Survival required softness, but not surrender. That afternoon, I took the veil to her shop. She looked up from her sewing machine needle poised midair, and her face went pale when she saw what I was holding. "I didn't want to," she whispered before I could speak. "He made me." "Judge." She nodded. "I thought he only made you sew for marriages," I said, trying to keep the quiver out of my voice. Clara's eyes flicked to the curtain. She lowered her voice to something barely audible. "It's not a wedding, Emmeline. It's a branding." I stood there, veil in my hands, heart thudding like horse hooves. "What do you mean?" She stood slowly, came around the counter, and reached for the veil. Her fingers traced the hem. "You ever wonder why none of the girls who marry him stay around?" she asked. "Or why their eyes look hollow afterward?" I had. Of course I had. There was Rachel Kane, who stopped speaking 2 weeks after her wedding, and Elsie Tomlin, who simply vanished, folks claiming she'd moved east, though no one ever got a letter. And sweet Janie Barker, whose body they found in the canyon broken on the rocks, with no cause but accident. "I stitched these veils," Clara said, voice shaking. "And every time I hope the next girl has the sense to run, but none of them do. They think it's love, or safety, or their only way out." I looked down at the silk in my hands. It was beautiful, seamless, clean. And suddenly, it felt like a noose. "Why me?" I asked, more to the room than to her. "Because you're the last untouched flower in the hollow," she said bitterly. That's what he said. My stomach turned. The veil no longer smelled of lavender. It smelled like power, like possession, like the breath of a man who believed God had given him dominion over every living thing, including me. "What if I say no?" Clara's eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Not fear. Pity. "You won't get the chance to." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small glass bottle. "This is valerian root. If he comes for you and you have to go put a drop in your tea, it won't stop what's coming, but it might help you forget for a little while." I didn't take it. Instead, I left the veil on her counter and walked out into the wind. That night, I dreamt of Mama. She was barefoot, standing in the canyon with her red scarf blowing behind her like a flag. She looked young, fierce, alive. She didn't speak. She just stared at me and then at the veil in my arms. And when I looked down, I saw it had turned black. When I woke, I went to Luca. He was stronger now. The color had returned to his cheeks, and though he still moved slowly, there was fire behind his eyes again. He hadn't asked why I was helping him, but now I needed to tell him. "There's something I need you to know," I said, voice thick. He nodded. I think I'm not safe here, and I think something bad is coming for me." He didn't answer. Just looked at me for a long, silent moment. Then he reached into his coat, the one I'd stitched back together with torn lace and rabbit thread, and pulled out a small object. It was a river stone. Smooth, gray, familiar. He placed it in my hand, closed my fingers around it, and whispered his first words since I'd found him. Then we don't wait. The day of the veil came faster than I expected. I never agreed to anything. I never said yes. But in Painted Hollow, silence was consent, and purity was currency. The moment Judge Crowthorne announced my name after Sunday service, his voice smooth like oil poured on a coffin lid, no one blinked. No one asked. They only nodded like it had been inevitable all along. "It is time Miss Emmeline fulfill her purpose," he said, smiling without joy. "The Lord calls us to order, and order begins with the home." Applause followed, scattered, polite, mechanical. I remember seeing Reverend Meyer bow his head, not in reverence, but in shame. I was to be joined with the judge at dusk, 3 days hence. Not married, no papers signed, just joined. The town understood what that meant. So did I. Clara came to me the night before. She didn't knock. She just appeared at my window like a shadow wrapped in shawl. "I made you something," she whispered. Her voice was uneven, like thread caught in a needle. I let her in. She handed me a cloth bundle. When I opened it, I saw a white slip-knot silk, not satin, but rough spun cotton. It was unfinished. The stitching along the hem had stopped halfway, the thread dangling like a question mark. "It's not a veil," she said. "It's a choice." I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw not just a seamstress, but a woman who had once dared to love and been broken for it. "I won't let him take you like he took the rest," she said. "But if we do this, you have to be willing to burn what needs burning." I nodded. Luca met us at the edge of the canyon before sunrise. He wore his war paint not of vengeance, but of ceremony. Ochre and ash drawn with steady hands marked his chest with the old symbols flame, earth, wind, and rebirth. He held no gun, only a small pouch of herbs and the riverstone I'd returned to him the night before. We walked silently into town, and for the first time in years, Painted Hollow paused. Men lowered their whiskey glasses. Women stepped out onto porches. Children stopped kicking dust. The desert held its breath. Luca stepped into the center of the square and raised the riverstone. "No man," he said, voice firm as thunder, "may claim what the earth has not blessed." The townsfolk murmured. Judge Crowthorne stepped out from the church, his cane clicking hard against the steps. "This isn't your land, boy," he spat, "and she ain't yours either." "She's not yours?" Clara said, stepping forward. "She never was." A beat of silence, and then I walked into the circle. I held up the veil, the silk one Clara had once sewn for the judge, and I set it in the fire pit behind the chapel. Clara lit the flame. The veil curled inward as it burned, turning gold, then gray, then gone. For a moment, it smelled of lavender, then nothing at all. Crowthorne shouted something, drew his pistol. Clara moved first. She stepped between us fast as breath. The gun roared. Her body arched, then crumpled at my feet. My scream tore something ancient from my chest. Luca didn't hesitate. He lunged, disarmed the judge, and slammed him to the ground, pressing the riverstone against his throat, not to kill, but to mark. "You do not own her," Luca said. "You do not own anyone." Reverend Meyer stepped forward. He held up his Bible for all to see, then dropped it in the dust, removed his collar, and turned away. The town stood frozen. Then Maybelline, the oldest widow in Painted Hollow, spit at the judge's feet. Someone clapped once, then another, and another. Something had broken. Something had healed. We buried Clara at sunrise the next day. No one told us we couldn't. No one dared. I wore red, not out of grief, but defiance. And when I placed a white feather on her grave, I whispered, "You stitched more than veils, Clara. You stitched our courage." Luca left that night. He didn't say goodbye, but I saw the trail smoke by the ridge at dawn. And when I stepped outside, I found the river stone on my windowsill, still warm, still mine. I never wore white again, not because I was grieving, not because I was impure, but because I didn't need saving anymore. In the months after Clara's death and Judge Crowthorne's fall, Painted Hollow changed not all at once and not always gently, but like spring following a long drought. Quiet at first, then relentless. The judge lived, but barely. He left town soon after the fire, carrying his silence and shame like a rusted cross. No one asked where he went. No one followed. The saloon stopped playing funeral songs. The piano was tuned for the first time in years. 3 widows took over the bank. Reverend Meyer still preached on Sundays, but now his sermons were short and full of questions instead of commands. He wore no collar, and sometimes, when he looked at me, I saw something soft behind the sorrow-like redemption might still live in the marrow of old men. The girls who once kept their heads down began to lift their chins. I heard giggles from behind store counters. I saw skirts a little brighter. I watched women speak without whispering. Even the canyon felt different. Luca was gone, of course. I didn't expect him to stay. He wasn't meant to live in fences, and I wasn't meant to follow a man into the desert just because he'd saved me. But I missed him. Not in the way you miss someone you've lost, but the way you miss a dream that woke you up. Sometimes at dusk, I'd see smoke curling on the ridges, and I'd wonder, was he watching the same sky? Was he remembering the same fire? I still kept the river stone, smooth, gray, honest. I placed it in a leather pouch and wore it beneath my dress close to my heart. On days when I felt uncertain, when the old silence crept back and the ache returned, I'd hold it and remember the moment I first stepped into that fire pit and chose myself. That memory burned cleaner than any veil. Mama's grave still sits beneath the cottonwood tree, but now it's no longer lonely. I visit her every Sunday, not with flowers, but stories. I sit on the earth she sleeps in and tell her how the town has grown kinder, how the children run past curfew and the horses aren't so afraid, how her daughter finally knows what freedom tastes like. I tell her about Clara, about Luca, about the wind that changed direction the day someone dared to say no out loud. Sometimes I think I feel her there, not in the ground, but in the way the branches sway, or how the sun lands just right on my shoulder, as if she's telling me she sees me now, not as the girl she left behind, but the woman I became without her. As for love, I'm still waiting, but I don't wait like I used to, head low, heart hungry. I wait with open hands, with eyes that see deeper than promises, with a soul that knows its worth. If love comes, it will be because it sees me standing, not kneeling, because it wants to join me at the fire, not dim it, because it burns clean, the kind they put in songs. If you ever find a veil where it shouldn't be, draped on a grave, folded in a box, laid at the feet of someone who never asked for it, ask yourself who left it there, and ask yourself who it was meant to claim. Because sometimes what looks like a wedding is really a war, and sometimes the only way to win is to burn the veil. In the dust-stained silence of Painted Hollow, one girl's quiet rebellion sparked a shift that no bullet ever could. The Bride of Painted Hollow is not just a tale of ghostly veils and desert winds. It's the story of a young woman, Emmeline, who dared to choose her voice over silence, truth over fear, and freedom over the illusion of love. Her journey from innocence to defiance, from longing to liberation shows the choices so many women have faced in every era to submit or to rise. This story reminds us that tradition can be a cage if built on fear, and that even the smallest acts, refusing a veil, lighting a fire, holding a stone can, change the course of a town. Painted Hollow may still stand, but it no longer breathes shame. It breathes hope. Because sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is say no. And sometimes what looks like a wedding is really a war. If this story touched something in you, your longing, your memories, your hidden strength, then follow it to the end. Click on the video